Welcome back, y'all. Dr. Nicole Truesdale here. As always, I'm your host and guide for this podcast, Abolitionist Dreamscape. So welcome. Okay, y'all, I know I've been off my schedule. It's been a little bit delayed, but I'm here, you're here. We are here together. It is episode 19. And this time I'm in a conversation with my friend, my colleague, my fam, my brother, Forrest Brooks, as we're talking about what community means to us. And this has really been a big kind of topic for me personally. I know it's all over various types of social medias. And really, it's pertinent right now in the present day as we are seeing not only the rise of authoritarian governments that have always kind of been there, but also populations starting to rise as well and take that shit back. So for us to do that, we need community, right? We need to understand how to talk to one another, trust one another. But how do we do that in especially societies that have taught us to only focus on the hustle, the grind, the individual? And so if both Forrest and I are talking about that this episode, as 42-year-olds who have come out of long-term relationships, have moved to Chicago, me coming back after a long time being gone since I'm from here, Forrest coming here new himself. So what does it mean to build community as Black queer folks who are a bit older, who are also looking to rethink what that means? Because the idea of friendship, community, romantic, platonic, business, community contacts, or relationships, right? When you put them on a hierarchy, that doesn't work. And so we're trying to also think, if we break the kind of hierarchical thinking that we've all been kind of conditioned to buy into for relationships, especially in the West, then what can we do and who do we want to be with and why? So we're talking about that this episode. But just know, y'all, I'm going to be back next week. I'm going to end the season. Seasons are about 10 episodes for right now. And next week, I will kind of talk about what the hell's been going on with me. There's been some shit. But also where I'm going, because I'm really excited. A lot of things in my life, in my business, have been at a standstill because I've had to pivot. And it's at the crossroads. I talk about the crossroads a lot, and this season's all been about the crossroads. So I'm going to finish next episode kind of summing up what the crossroads for me has been and why it's important for us to sit in these uncomfortable, honestly chaotic locations, because we have to make a choice. But again, I'll talk about that next week. Okay. Now, as always, y'all, I can only do this podcast and the work that I do with y'all's support. And y'all's support is definitely needed. So listen, let's do reciprocity here. If we're trying to build community that is mutually reciprocal, and we want to do things a different way, then we have to start doing things a different way in the present. And so I really want reciprocity. If I have fed you, please feed me back. And you can do so in various ways. I have my Patreon, in which I'm doing a lot more of my teaching on. I am moving off of TikTok and IG as much, and that would be a place in which I'll post mostly clips. But I'm moving my content, my creation, my ability to just dream to my Patreon and my YouTube. Those platforms compensate me more, and I have to be honest, like, we also live in societies in which we need compensation in one way, shape, or form. So if you want to support me there, please go there for my Patreon. Tiers start as low as $5 a month, and I will be actually posting shorts on my Patreon instead of posting my shorts on my TikTok. So even if you want to check it out for free, there's a free option, y'all, and I do have free content there as well. So from free up to $100, you can pick the tier that best suits you. You can also support by like, shares, and views. So if this podcast resonates for you, please like and share it. Please send it out to folks that you think would resonate with my work, because that gets me in the kind of ethers, these algorithms that don't really like Black queer folks, right? But we have to make these systems work for us. So please share, like, and comment. And I do appreciate your comments. So whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, please let me know what you think, what's coming up for you. And also topics or things that are interest of you, because I have my ideas for next season. I'll talk about that next episode. But I'm always interested in what folks are interested in as well. Okay. Now last thing I'm going to say is I have a number of offerings on my website. So please go to drnicoletruesdale.com, and where you can see the different services I offer. I do have astrology readings, and for this summer, if you use the code SUMMER, you get $25 off any astrology reading that I offer. until the end of August. And I also am an executive leadership coach as well as a consultant. So you can find that information out on my website of different ways to book me, along with speaking engagements and facilitation. I love to talk, y'all, if y'all didn't know. And I miss being out in the speaker circuit. So please reach out if you're interested in a speaker and you have a budget. Okay. Now let's get to the episode. Hey y'all, welcome back. It's Dr. Nicole Truesdale here as always, and I'm here this time with my friend, my colleague, my collaborator, and family, Forrest Brooks. So hello, Forrest.
Hello.
So Forrest was here a couple of episodes ago. I want to say episode 14, I think, 13 or 14. We talked about education and our own understanding of what it means to be educators right now, right?
Yes. We did a little bit of building on that subject.
Yes. And so we're still sipping today and we're having a conversation. And earlier, we were talking about some personal business, but then we really got into what we want to talk about tonight, which is community. And we're both 42, right? So last time we were talking about how we're 42, we're queer, we're single now, coming out of long-term relationships. Both of us left 15-year relationships for various reasons. And now we're kind of coming into what I would call this very Uranus opposition moment of life having to be broken down to its fundamental base. And now it's up to us to kind of remake it, right? And for me, it's been really lonely. Be real honest, right? It's been really fucking lonely. And it's sometimes embarrassing to kind of talk about because there's this perception in society that by the time you're 40, 42, you should have these friend groups, right? And you get these movies and IG posts and TikToks of the Tyler Perry-ish type, folks, couples that have been together, for forever. And when I left my ex, when I came out and stuff, I talk about in other episodes, I left everything, including folks that I thought I was in community with. So the last 2 years has been a lot of breaking of relationships, breaking of what even a relationship is and what I want, and friendship and romantic partnership and business relationship, right? And because of that, it's been pretty lonely because I've had to be by myself, right? And learn how to be with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to talk tonight because we're both collaborating on a project because we are both new to the Chicago area. You just moved here about a year ago. I came about 2 years ago, moved back to the city. So it's really new to me because I left when I was 17. So this really is a new city to me as well. And being Black and queer and single in the city at 40 and 42, it's a bit, it's how do you build community? How do you find people? Where do you go? What do you do? What do you like? What don't you like? And so it got us kind of working together and thinking about well, what do we like? And we both like music. We both like talking. We both like hanging out. We both like good liquor, a good vibe. And so I wanted to kind of think through and talk with you about what does it mean to build community right now in a time in which community itself has been broken down so much for whatever reason, structures, COVID, all the like. How do we do it? What does it look like? What does it mean? And why are we doing it now?
Yeah. I mean, and just really quickly on the loneliness piece, I can definitely, I definitely kind of agree with how it can feel lonely, but I think about how much more lonely it was being in the constructs of relationships that weren't working. It's you're connected to somebody along lines that kind of you're supposed to quote unquote do because this is the path that's been laid out. This is the type of relationship that you're supposed to be in and the type of relationship model that you're supposed to be in, and how that in and of itself was more lonely. So I look at this kind of period of I don't know if I would call it incubation or what I look at this period of us not fully having this fully formed friend group yet, because I see that community coming as an opportunity to really be intentional about what you want that community to be, how you want that space to feel, how you want that space to function and to move, so that whatever is built next is not just a replication of the same kind of models that came before it. So I'm kind of welcoming this kind of time to be somewhat of a laboratory of me trying different people out, trying different things out to kind of see, oh, okay, this person brought out this in me. I enjoy this. This person brings out this in me. I enjoy this. How do these things work together? How do they sometimes create fiction? And I'm experimenting a lot right now when it comes to my dating life, especially, and to a degree with my friend groups as well, because I'm kind of like testing out, oh, this is a group of people that I do these things with, this is a group of people that I do these things with. And I'm not fully sure how everything cross pollinates or if it even should cross pollinate. Because again, sometimes things are kind of better in their own, spaces. And like I said, I'm just kind of treating this as kind of a laboratory to figure out, oh, this is how this comes. And in the process of that, what's coming forward for that is like these collaborations that I'm having with you and the conversations that we're having as a result of it to kind of process, oh, how does this work? And the notion of there not being a community TM, but multiple communities,
Mm-hmm.
plural, and how those things can work together and benefit each other. And that's kind of what keeps coming up in my mind as we talk through these things.
And I love that idea of the experiment though, right? Like, cause it brings play back in. And that's something that like, so, cause again, like Forrest is a Libra rising, I'm a Scorpio rising. So like, we're literally just one house away from each other. But I got a massive Libra stellium. So we be vibing on certain things, but it's really interesting because like the experiment piece is something that like is really heavy for me this next like the Saturn and Pisces transit because it's my fifth house. Like I have to get serious about my play and about creativity and get serious about dating in terms of what does a dating experience look like to me? What do I want in that? Like what and how do I bring myself and play into it, right? So this idea of experimenting with like what do I like and who do I want to be with and how different people and different groups bring different things out has been, I'll be honest, like amazing, but also a weird mind fuck because I didn't realize how rigid I had gotten. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like this weird like mirror you take on. So like when we went out, so we went out for folks, we're both in Chicago. So we went out to a party that's like over 30. And it was raining, and it was one of their first outside parties for the season called Slow Mo. And I realized that like we have been out before listening to music because Forrest and I are like we both love music. Forrest has got me on some amazing new artists and bands and stuff, and he's working on his own album. He's a music producer, like all kinds of stuff what Forrest does. And so we were out, and I realized I had not been dancing though, really. And so when it started raining, and I went to the bathroom, and you said, "Nicole, you have to go. You have to leave me alone. Go talk to other people." Because you want to get out there and meet folks. So when I went to the bathroom and I came back and you were out in the rain dancing, I was like, well, fuck it, might as well, right? And that's when I started to have fun. So that's when it hit me how much of like the Scorpio comes out in which I want to almost put a shield on myself. And I'm 6'3", so I'm acting like people don't even see me, right? Like even though like I'm this towering figure, like I think I was like in a red dress or some shit like that,
Mhm.
right? But I love this idea of experiment and play because it reminds us that part of living is to be playful, right?
That and you know what? Okay, so what that's bringing up to me too is also the way that you've been kind of talking about ego lately and about
Mm.
not killing it but embracing it.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. I mean, especially when you kind of talk about something, with your height, right? Like that's a thing that you cannot change that, right? It's
No.
there. So you can try to like shrink, but what the fuck would you shrink? Why would you
Right.
shrink? Stand in it. You know what I'm saying? And it's that notion of standing in it and in doing that and empowering yourself, it draws out a completely different side of yourself, which draws in a completely different group of people and a completely different experience to have. And I love kind of that. That to me is what the experimentation of putting yourself in different situations, being with different people can bring out. Because it's like there have been times where I was thinking, I was like, oh shit, I I forgot how I forgot how charming I can be.
You gotta say it.
If you give me the right person, then I can do the banter thing. Because I hadn't been in those situations, in those settings for a while. And it was through the process of, there was one person who took me to like a little house party thing, and I was charming the pants off of everybody. And I was like, fuck, I forgot I'm good at this. But I haven't allowed myself to be in this situation for so long because of my consideration for my former situation, that I kind of had insulated myself to insulate that person. And nothing wrong with them or anything like that, but it's just in denying myself that atmosphere, I've been missing out on a whole piece of myself that can be beneficial, can open up doors, can do other things for me, that I had kind of cut off access to. So this is why I'm kind of like saying, oh, let me explore myself in different dynamics and see kind of what comes out. Because through that, especially when, listen, we know that everything is crumbling around us. Yes. These structures are falling left and right. And we know that because of the way that they are crumbling, we are going to have to now more than ever rely upon each other, more so than a state. So we got to get real good at not buying into this whole idea of fearing the other, of being so guarded about the other. We've got to get into the idea of opening ourselves up to each other, because we're going to need each other. I would say sooner rather than later, like a lot sooner than some folks think. So it's time to really start kind of opening ourselves up to what we can explore and what can we create with each other, especially on the low, because things are moving in a weird direction, y'all. I'm just saying, that's what comes up for me.
But that makes sense, because I think that's the strategy we need, right? So like so Forrest mentioned the ego. So on my Patreon, I've been doing these kind of ego musings. I've really been playing with musings and contemplations. And this is what me and Forrest are actually collaborating on, that I'm really excited for. We have a draft of it. Forrest put together this amazing like soundscape compilation. I said I wanted the elements to come together and do X, Y, and Z. And he literally took that idea and then made the sound for it. I put some contemplation on top. He made the vocals come together, and it's amazing. So that'll be coming out soon, y'all. We got to finish it up. I had to do some artwork, but I'm really excited for it. So I did some musings on that. If you want to learn more, go to the Patreon. But like that is something that has been really loud, right? In terms of thinking about what does it mean to kind of take up space, so that you really understand who you also want to take up space with, right? Because the strategy is that we need to figure out what we're creating together. Like that's the strategy. Like if everything is breaking and everything is crumbling, then what are we creating? Because we can talk about burning shit down. And I get it. You want to have the reaction, especially if you're just kind of quote unquote awakening, whatever the fuck that means right now. So we're going on. Okay, great. We all have our different openings up. But if you are burning something down, what is in its place? Because if you put nothing in its place, then what is known is what will be recreated. It may have a different face. It may have a different kind of, way it presents itself, but it's the same shit, right? Mm-hmm. So I really been thinking a lot about like, what's the strategy for building community that actually allows us to build communities, like networks, ecosystems, because we need each other. Like we're human beings. We need one another. And we need to not only rely on one or two people for everything. That's not fair to you or the other person, right? And I think that privileging of that, what you were saying earlier about like the kind of romantic relationship, that very heteronormative, patriarchal, Christian type of, two-parent household relationship, it's isolating. And if we're all being honest, I don't care if you're queer or not, none of us really like it because we don't have any help. It's not real community. That's what I lived in for 10 years. And me and my ex now, I think, have a better relationship not being in that type of relationship, so that we can co-parent in a way that gives us flexibility. So then what does it look like to build community, right? That doesn't allow and replicate that same shit.
And one of the things I think about kind of when I think about how community should function, or how I want it to function and how I want it to feel, is I think back on my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
And I think back on my childhood in terms of the way that my familial community operated at that time. So the way that my familial community operated at that time was every Sunday we go to my grandmother's house. And after church, they were always cooking, and I got together with my family like every Sunday. And it's this like 3-bedroom house in the country. My grandparents had about 11 kids. So, but it's this big multi-generational communal experience that was a regular thing. So it's everything from the kids to the teenagers to the adults to the elders. We are all there communing in space. And yes, we had our little kind of pockets but in that process, you get the vibrancy of youth. You know what I'm saying? But you get the wisdom of elders to kind of direct that energy. And that's where these things can happen and where they can come together. And even in alternate spaces that weren't kind of like the family cooking gathering spaces, I think about like the spades parties or the fight parties. That's my jam. That's what I want to create is that spades party, fight party jam where yeah, I mean we were there for a fight, but I didn't care. I didn't care about fighting. I just knew it was gonna be good food. And after the fight went off, they was gonna be jamming. It was gonna be my uncle would have like a bunch of like records. I was always focused on the music because, come on, but everybody was gonna be jamming. It was gonna be this and there's drinking. There's all these things, but there's all these stories and all of these experiences that come from that, and it's this vibrant atmosphere that can be there, but is multi-generational in a sense. So when I think about kind of how I want these communities to feel, there's a sense of multi-generationalism because yes, there's an adult space, but you also want to keep in mind that for certain events, for certain things, you want to be able to have us all be in the same space. Yeah. Like that's just how things have to work. And there's a richness that comes from that, from having all of us together at the same time. And at the same time, there's also a richness that comes from being able to do that. But it's the fluidity of sometimes this is a family event. Sometimes it's grown folks doing their thing. Yeah. But it's that regular way of being in community with each other and being fluid with each other that we can kind of build bonds, be able to figure things out. Because sometimes those ended up turning into like parties that we was, throwing to pay somebody's rent. Or, in the midst of that conversation, it comes up that somebody may need a little bit of help with this. And but this is going to get back to one of to why I want to get into community building in the first place. So many times I hear people kind of fixate on things like mutual aid. Mm-hmm. I love mutual aid, but mutual aid does not work without community. If you don't have trust and bonds already built, mutual aid is going to fail because one, I have to feel vulnerable enough to bring my issues to community. If I'm guarded with community, I'm not going to utilize mutual aid. And then I have to give I have to care about you enough to be able to give up my resources to you. That you got to take care of that piece, right? Other thing you were talking about, like when we were talking about the structures of being in those kind of isolating relationships, we can take that out of romantic relationships. We can take that to the way movement work has been going on for like the last 50 years. Yes. When we look for the one or two messianic figures to put all of the things on. We've seen how that model fails. How focusing on one individual, all that does is just paint a target on the back of that individual. So the next thing you know, they're being discredited in order to discredit the movement. Yep. And then you end up diminishing things by relying so heavily on one or two people at any given time. So it's this point of us kind of looking at what has worked, what hasn't worked, and us really looking at, are we just looking at everything to revere it, or are we going to actually learn the lessons?
Listen, that's the motherfucking question. Let's be real, and that honestly, like when you are speaking, all I can hear is astrology, right? Because this is literally Saturn and Pisces. Like when I say this is Saturn and Pisces, like asking who do you give your authority up to and why? and what is the collective responsibility in figuring out what we all believe in. Like, what is the foundation? If we know the shit ain't working and Saturn is hanging out in the deep sea, he's saying too, like, tradition is not meant to be rigid. We have to flow. Where are you flowing to, right? And this is the conversation with the North and South Node transits in Libra and Aries. What do we have to release in terms of our attachments to outdated understandings of justice and balance and relationships and value and worth, so that we can come into an understanding of what we actually truly individually need, so that we can collectively figure out what the fuck we're doing, right? And so I think that this idea of community, I completely agree in terms of multi-generational and but trust and bond. And I think that's really important, this idea of trust. And I'm realizing something once I got out of higher ed and like got out this relationships and like the loneliness, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, I realized it was lonely because I didn't realize how much of my time was always with other people. Like I never had alone time. So when when I was separated and got divorced, that was the first time I actually had alone time. And like by myself, because really did isolate. I did stop talking to folks. I didn't know who I could trust because I was going through a divorce and a custody thing. It all worked out. But like at the time I was like, I'm fighting for my life here, really, like I felt like, and trying to build a business at the same time. And so I was realizing that all these communities I thought I had, I never really showed up as fully me because I couldn't trust that I could and be vulnerable in a space that was talking about vulnerability, that was talking about accountability and community and all this shit, right? Like I was in those justice spaces through a higher ed lens and through the kind of third sector lens, internationally as well. And like all of those it was like a harsh reality that I had to sit with and then have to really grapple with. And then, okay, Nicole, then if that's not how you want to then engage with the building of community and stuff, because you don't trust that space. And when you did open up, times I did open up, I had my ass handed to me, right? Like hard, and it hurt. So it's like, okay, well then what does it mean to build communities of trust? Well, how do you build trust? And for me, it's like, well, I got to kind of see you a bit. We're going to be in the same space. It's a familiar face after a while because we all vibe into something that we like. And I like music. Like, and I forgot how much I love music, so much, always have. And so like thinking about, okay, if we all vibe into the same sound, and I can see you over and over again. And we all basically trying to call spirit down, a pleasure, a fun, of what, because like we all older. We ain't trying to, no offense, I'm not trying to fight right now, honestly. I'm trying to drink, dance, be in the bed by 9 so I can fuck and then go home. You know what I'm saying? Like it really is like a very simple pleasure of hanging out. Then for me, community to me is bringing the juke joint and the ring shout together in a space so that we can make a space for folks to cross roads together, literally come together and cross outside of preconceived identities that, quite frankly, right now we know ain't shit in terms of telling you whether you can trust somebody or not.
And okay, so what that is bringing up for me is, this is to me why I think it's so needed from a spiritual aspect.
Yes.
So I think about even how different the church experience is from what I grew up with. I think about how music has always set the tone for everything, right?
Everything.
And I think about what I've seen, what pushed me to kind of walk away from the church over the last 20 years. And the way that I saw church as like smaller communities that supported one another be infiltrated and kind of taken over by the concept of the megachurch.
Yes.
Which has this heavy capitalist overtone. I mean, you're gonna call that shit an undertone. It's an overtone. Like it is so heavily embedded in that. And it is removed such of the because here's the thing. Yes, y'all, we understand that Christianity rooted in the colonizer, all that, but we brought so much of our fucking magic to it.
Listen.
That we imbued it with power.
Gave it spirit.
Because you're not gonna tell me that I did not experience what I experienced when I was in church spaces that were tapped into spirit. I've seen some shit. When they are tapped in, when they're really kind of on board, and when everything is coming together, the energy that you feel from that, the only other place that I felt that energy is on a dance floor. When there is a DJ that is tapped in, that can take you on a journey, that gives you that building until they give you that sweet release when you are there and you let go and you are free. The only two places I've experienced that are in church and in the club. Like they're connected. We're taught that they're separate things, but that spirit. When you tapped in, when you can get to, that's what's drawn me to making music, is trying to tap into those frequencies, trying to create those. I don't even say create those frequencies. It's more so allow myself to channel those frequencies and to imbue that. Like one of the things that Nicole and I've talked about when I was explaining kind of how I know something is really kind of tapped in is, there are certain people when they talk about like listening to songs, they're like, oh man, I'm so jealous I didn't write that. Not for me. For me, what I get is, oh my God, you tapped in. How can I tap in?
Yes.
Like, how can I the energy that you just captured, how can I kind of access that? And then I know if somebody's like, if somebody's shit is like really hidden, then the first thing that I'm going to do is go sit down at my keyboard and start playing what it brings up for me. How can I give myself that emotion through whatever chord structure that comes up for me? And it's not me trying to like chase the same thing or copy what they're doing, but it's just that feeling. I know when somebody's kind of giving me something that feels so good, I'm going to go try to like recreate it for myself. And so that I can access to it and maybe like give it, out in whatever way I, put it out in whatever way I put it out. But that type of way of tapping into community, that type of way of tapping into spirit, that's why I wanted to create these spaces, because we are really devoid in spiritual spaces of that. Because the church has been so overrun with like this capitalism, so much with the protecting of predators and all of that. There needs to be somewhere where folks can come together in a multi-generational way to build with each other, because that's what church used to be. When you look at the civil rights movement, that's what church was. The church was where you got civics education. The church was where you got training. The church was where you got like all of these different locations. And systematically, them 3-letter organizations have done a lot to infiltrate and dismantle those institutions and the community connections that they foster. And that's the reason why I'll say some of y'all are so ready to jump into these direct actions, but we lack the infrastructure that, if things really get to going the way that they got to going back then, they at least had those structures in place. They could quickly mobilize and can quickly marshal resources and can quickly organize. We are scattered all over the place. So when I think of, and the reason multi-generational keeps coming up for me is because I'm not doing this work for myself.
Yeah.
I want to do this work for these kids so that because I wouldn't put it on our generation, because our generation just inherited some shit. But like the one before us allowed shit to get dismantled and so disorganized and so dismayed that there's no foundation for anything to be built on. So that community building is foundational work. That's why I want to do it. It's foundational. And I want to build it in a way that's more sustainable than what was there before. And I personally think, obviously, a Judeo-Christian structure is not a sustainable model.
Yeah.
It's not a good foundation for it. But
even the capitalistic one, though, too. Think about it, because two go hand in hand right now, right? Like, because I think about, excuse me, I think about how coming out of higher ed, because higher ed loves to co-opt the idea of community. Like that is the selling point, because that's what gets you to leave your home and your friends and family or whatever it is to go somewhere else, right, for 4+ years. and then pay for it. One way or another, right? A lot. And I used to work in both academic and student affairs. So, like, but even in academic affairs, I was working in with programs that were about community. So they were McNair, SSS, through the TRIO programs, along with Mellon and other things, right? So a lot of my work was about having to build community or being in charge of other locations that had to build community, right? And it always killed me because how community was talked about was always through this idea of family. At least the one how I where I was the locations I was in. And I had to really push back on that because it was like, you know, especially with the trio program, they're like, we are family. And it's like that you can't assume that people's understanding of family is the same. So if they had a traumatic family experience before they were 18, now you're saying we are family, but this is also a program that they need in order to support themselves. That's the way you're doubling down and whether you know it or not in an abusive understanding of family and community, right?
Yeah.
And I'm speaking for me, right? Like that was me, right? And I was so intentional, and I knew so many other people. So when I came in, I said, no, we're not doing that. I'm not your mama, right? Because I can't be your mother because putting that on my body means you will break me, right? Because the idea of motherhood in these societies. So we were focused more on like building kind of like groups, right? Like we talk about the affinity groups. That was when affinity groups were starting to come, like it was first coming into like this idea of how do you build folks based upon interests and stuff like that. But that also, I realized that shit really don't work, y'all. And can we really talk about how the fact that in some of these structured spaces, affinity groups really don't work like we think they do, because all you doing is reinforcing the identity and how it is constructed by the structure you are in that already told you that it don't really see your ass, but then they're gonna tell you how to see your ass. So therefore, you are seeing yourself through the lens of somebody who can't see themselves, but is telling you how to see you to benefit them. You know what I mean?
It's a mess. It's a
It's
mess.
a fucking mess. Because the thing is, and I'm dealing with the aftermath. Me and my staff dealt with the aftermath. The students not figuring it out, the staff not. So all you're doing is there's no ability to build trust, right? There's no trust really built because then there's always this vying for the identity marker to prove that you belong in these fucked up spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this is why music matters so much because you're right. Like, so I'm part of Lukumi, right? So I left the church for a while, a long time ago, and my practice is Lukumi. But even within the practice, right, in any kind of Odisha practice, and we can talk about ATRs in general, capitalism's still there. So even this idea of community and stuff, you got to be able to pay in some of these houses to be able to do certain things, right? And when we call in spirit down, spirit is really still about the music, still about the food, still about the community, still about folks coming together. But my problem with some of these houses is because of the way Christianity is still there as a synchronization, the patriarchy is still there. So you
Mm-hmm.
still seeing patriarchal understandings of how community should be built. So women are still in doing one thing, men do. I don't want in my communities the gendered binary roles coming in because that doesn't allow us to actually build together. All we're doing is replicating the same thing that is telling somebody needs to be of service while somebody needs to. That don't work, y'all. You know what I'm saying? That don't work. So for me, music again allows us to come at least in a space to come together in whatever way you can. If you got to sit down, if you can't, if you need mobility, whatever it is, you can still allow the music to speak right with one another in a
Yeah.
way that goes beyond all that bullshit.
Well, it moves beyond the identities that are imposed upon us to connect to our humanity.
Yes.
Because when we when the groove kind of hits, when you start really hitting on the 1 and the 3, you can't deny that. You cannot deny the foundation of the kick and the bass. You can't deny that. You can't deny the snap of a clap. You cannot deny that. It's in your body. You feel it. And you can't there's an element to it that you cannot deny. And again, I think about even in church, when the choir hits, when the choir is really doing its thing, there's a way that the whole temperature is moved and it brings out such emotion. You
Mhm.
cannot deny it. Now, the problem is a lot of these churches will take that emotion that it draws from and use that to exploit. So there, and that's the intentionality of who you're building community with. How is it being organized? How's accountability built into the model of that? But see, that's the other thing. A lot of y'all will say words like accountability, but baby, you cannot have accountability. You cannot hold anybody accountable that you are not in community with. That's one of the reasons why, like, and I'm not going to get drawn, but that's one of the reasons why you'll never really hear me when I'm talking about celebrities or certain public figures kind of talk about accountability in terms of that. I can talk about in terms of what I will support and what I won't support, but I'm not in community with those people, so I can't hold them accountable. I have to be in community with folks so that you see me and I see you. And we trust each other and we're vulnerable with each other. And in our vulnerability and in our trust of each other, one of the things that our vulnerability produces is the ability to be accountable to one another. This is where therapy language from a westernized lens be fucking y'all up. That it's not my job to do this. It's not my job to teach you. Are you in community with them? Because then it is your job. If I'm in community with you, it is my job to educate you. If I want to be in community with you, if I want to build community with you, then it is my job to patiently open up your eyes, to patiently meet you where you are and bring you to where I want to be.
Yes.
Because a lot of y'all leftists can get real haughty about not wanting to quote unquote educate people because you done read some Marxism, you done read some like obscure Eastern European person stealing ideas of indigeneity and spouting them back to you, and you've trusted that rather than trusting your own damn community because now you're the special Negro, so you know better than them regular Negroes. But them regular Negroes had the shit figured out. That ranch, I learned more from my granddaddy as a ranch hand with a sixth grade education. He knew how to do community. He knew how to feed not just his family, but feed the entire community around him. That's why when my grandma passed and when my grandpa passed, it was a church full of people. Because they had not just fed us, they had fed the community. That's what you need. And it's no secret. My grandfather was born in 1914. My grandmother was born in 1918. Think about, there couldn't be any reliance upon the state. There could not be. There only had to be reliance upon each other. And a lot of y'all have let those recipes get lost. So at this point, if we want to rebuild those recipes, because we're going to need that, because it looks like the state is, they're trying to bring that old thing back, then you got to look at how do we rely upon each other. And for me, that's a music space, right? Yes. But for you, that may be a gardening space.
It may be food.
Because gardening may be your jam. How do you grow food with people?
Yeah.
How do you learn to supplement food so that, because food is costing a lot for everybody. So how can we supplement that for each other in community?
Childcare. How do we build communities that we trust one another so children can actually grow together? Because they also need community. Like in queer community, for me, I'm like,
community.
Safe space, like real safety, not this, I didn't know, a safe space that we can let our children run free and understand what it means to run free. Like what to feel freedom in their bodies, to feel it in their hair, to know it as a norm, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I completely agree with you, Forrest, and I love how you are framing this. Again, it goes back to the experiment you talked about earlier. We have to experiment then with the communities that we need to be building based upon our own body's need. Like, do we know what we need? And that's the thing I always come back to. Like, we can always project out, but when we're trying to build with one another, we have to know who we are too. And we figure out who we are by ourselves, but also with other people, because we don't know, right? Like, I get it. Like, we have a lot of these things on social media, the shadow journal, and people are saying, I found my peace because basically I don't have nobody. But let's be real, we're human beings. You will need somebody eventually. You'll need multiple people eventually. And not in this like extractive way, but like in a mutually beneficial, like we both need to live.
And there's parts of yourself that you can only see in community with
somebody else, because we are duality.
It won't come out unless you're with other people.
It won't.
need that. You need that.
We do. And realize that it's not about being perfect. And so, like, again, both of us being very heavy Libra energy too, right? Like this idea of people pleasing and stuff. What happens if we please ourselves, right? And I think that's what something people need to understand about Venus as a sign or a planet in general with Venus, with Libra and Taurus. Like, if we actually can please ourselves, we understand that pleasure comes with being with other people too. Like that really, that's the self. So self needs others. And so who do you want to other with, right? And that's something that will also require you to look at yourself. And I'm really this a lot for myself too. I'm heavy the last few weeks, especially, is like having to be okay with my own duality and complexities and contradictions, right? Being like, no, okay, Nicole, fuck it. You're a Leo as well. You are a Leo sun. You are a Leo North Node. There's ways that you will take up space. What does it look like if you were just you? Who else would be attracted to you? And let's be real. You, Forrest, like we vibe like a mug. and you will be like, no, do more. like it's okay. Do more. But when I do more, we get free drinks. Like I'm like, oh, this is nice. But again, now I'm realizing like I can have community and realize I can be myself and be open and so I think we're realizing in these moments that in order for us to be free, we really have to be free, right? We have to be free. So can you sit in your own humanity, in the messiness of it, in the diversity of it, so that you, like you said earlier, the diversity of who we really need at our different tables. And when it comes down to being human again, even with all the mythology, all the gods, all the God and the Bible and stuff, even Jesus broke bread and drank wine in order to be with community. Even he said you have to feed people to bring them together so that y'all can get educated about what is actually oppressing you, right? I'm not even a Catholic or Christian anymore, but you can still learn from these different traditions. So, like, what does it look like to break bread with folks? But if you can't make the bread, how can you break it? if you don't want to learn from the baker because that baker said X, Y, and Z one time, and your moral high ground is so high that no one can touch it but you, then how will you be able to actually do what you say you want to do? Break an oppressive system.
I mean, as the old folks would say, some folks are so heavenly that they ain't got no earthly good, and that can be applied to the. But it can also be applied to certain folks in certain leftist spaces. You are so quote unquote woke. You are so enlightened. You are so whatever. Insert spiritual model here that you've dehumanized yourself to look down upon other folks. That's the thing that you have to be careful about when you're raising yourself above.
Listen,
when you're engaging in that hierarchical thinking, where you've said that I'm trying to constantly perform and prove that I am the better whatever, then in order for you to be up here, somebody has to be down low here. And we keep seeing this model go from spirituality to spirituality, from the way that our capitalist structure works. If we're gonna break that, then we're gonna break that. We've got to stop thinking that the only way to fight these hierarchical structures that are oppressing all of us is to try to replicate and build other hierarchies to fight. That's the trick. The trick is that they're trying to get us to replicate their model, but they're always going to be better at their model. That's what our dear Lord Audra told us, that you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. You can temporarily, you can hold things off, you can maintain, you can eke out a win or two, but you're not going to be able to dismantle the master's tools with the master's house with the master's tools. You're going to have to do something different. And what is more different to a hierarchy than community?
Yeah.
To us building across from each other, to us sitting in human difference and and learning how to be comfortable with that.
Yes.
And still collaborate and still work together. To not always be looking at each other as competition, but as potential collaborators.
In order to collaborate, right? In order to really collaborate, you got to have know exactly what you're saying. You have to have your grounding, your foundation set. You have to be clear about what the hell you will and will not do, right? And that only comes when you get grounded in yourself. Like, so I think there's a lot. There's a lot that we can keep talking about this, but we're gonna wrap this up, y'all. We've been talking for a minute here, but just to kind of bring this together, like what Forrest is getting us to really question, which I appreciate, is this idea of what does it mean to build community by actually being in your humanity. Like if you're humanity led versus the construction of who you think you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be with, how it's supposed to look, right? If all you broke all of that and it's really asked yourself, what do you like? What are you attracted to? And who do you want to create with? Who do you want to build with? Then who would actually be in your community? And I think that is a scary question to answer because it will actually mean you have to be honest with yourself and then with one another. So, hey, this is where you got to start dreaming, y'all. And this is why I always say strategic dreaming is really important right now. Because if we can't imagine new futures in the present, then all we're going to do, as you said, Forrest, is replicate the same old thing over and over again. So, Forrest, if folks want to like kind of engage with you, kind of get into what you're doing, kind of get updates about like your music, talk about collaborating with you for music production, how can they reach out?
I'm on Insta, Jungle915. I'm gonna get something different at some point, but for right now, that's where I'm at. I do the TikTok. I'm at Forrest Eugene on there, but I'll be building more in those spaces, especially right now. I'm really focused on the creation part of the work. So the next phase for me is to kind of focus more on distributing because I've been more behind the scenes than I have been kind of out front. But yeah, that's where folks can reach me and, hopefully kind of connect and go from there. Otherwise, catch me on these streets, okay? I'm all up and through here.
Listen. and y'all, I have information in the show notes too as well. But be on the lookout for the first collaboration between Forrest and I in the next the next month or so, I would say, once we get finalized for our first contemplation, and also be looking out for us doing some in-person events. Give us a few months. We're getting some sponsorships and collaborations together, but we are committed to practicing what we preach. So we are bringing this kind of conversation into the public in real life with music and liquor, where we bring literally the juke joint and the ring shot together to cross each other so that we can figure out what it means to dream of new futures together. All right. So if you want to learn more with me, go ahead and check out my Patreon. There's a bunch of stuff there. But as always, keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through our dreamscape so we can actually bring our futures into the present. I got one more episode left after this, and we're going to close it off for season 2. So as always, let me know what you think in the show notes or the comments below.